The alarms began screaming before anyone understood why. Red symbols flooded the Imperial command sphere, spinning faster with every heartbeat. Alien officers shouted over one another as tactical displays showed something impossible unfolding at the edge of controlled space. A fleet was dying. Human ships, small, mismatched, badly armored, were being erased under precise Imperial fire. One by one, they vanished in silent flashes. Hulls cracked. Reactors failed. Escape pods never launched. It should have been routine. It should have been forgettable. But the room was filled with panic. "Confirm identification again," the fleet overseer demanded, his voice tight. The analyst's mandibles trembled as data scrolled past his eyes. "Confirmed. Species designation, human. Origin, uncertain." "Uncertain," another officer snapped. "Every species is cataloged." "They are not," the analyst replied. "They weren't in our records." Or rather, he hesitated. They were marked as irrelevant. The overseer stared at the display. The human fleet was advancing straight into the kill zone. They made no attempt to flee. No evasive maneuvers. No surrender signals. Imperial cannons fired again. 3 more human ships disappeared. "Why are they still moving forward?" a junior tactician asked. "They can see the outcome." The question hung in the air. The Empire had crushed hundreds of civilizations. Every species broke the same way. First panic, then retreat, then begging. Humans did none of it. Instead, their formation tightened. "That ship is accelerating," someone said. "It's venting power beyond safe limits." The overseer leaned closer. "Target it." Before the order could finish transmitting, the human vessel surged ahead of the rest and slammed directly into the path of an Imperial cruiser. It did not fire. It did not dodge. It exploded. The blast tore through the cruiser's shields, rocking the command deck. Systems flickered. Shockwaves rippled across space. The human ship ceased to exist. The Imperial cruiser survived, but barely. Silence followed. Then angry voices. "They are using suicide tactics," an officer hissed. "Primitive. Desperate." "Then why now?" the overseer asked quietly. On the main display, the human fleet continued to die. Yet the pattern was wrong. They were not scattering. They were not charging blindly. They were spacing themselves. The analyst swallowed. "Sir, their destruction points are forming a structure." "What structure?" the overseer demanded. I don't know yet." Another human ship broadcast a message. Short, buried under static. The translators failed to decode it before the ship was torn apart. "What did it say?" someone asked. "We couldn't translate it," the analyst replied. But it was not a distress call. Imperial weapons fire intensified. The remaining human ships vanished in quick succession. In less than 3 minutes, the fleet was gone. Victory. Yet no one celebrated. Debris drifted exactly where the humans had died. Thick clouds of radiation, wreckage, and twisted metal. Navigation warnings began flashing across multiple sectors. Jump calculations failed. Sensors screamed errors. The overseer slowly straightened, a cold realization creeping through him. "These ships," he said, voice low, "they were not fighting us." The room fell silent. They were choosing where to die. On the display, the last human signal faded into nothing. And for the first time in centuries, the Empire wondered if it had just made a mistake it could never undo. The Empire did not panic easily. It had ruled star systems longer than most species remembered their own origins. Disorder was something that happened to others, briefly, before correction. So when the human fleet vanished and the guns fell silent, protocol demanded calm. The command sphere dimmed from red to amber. Damage reports scrolled in. The Imperial cruiser that had taken the blast from the suicidal human ship listed shield degradation, minor hull fractures, and crew injuries. Nothing critical. A victory. And yet, no one moved. The debris field remained on every display, floating exactly where the humans had died. It was thick. Too thick. Sensors struggled to see through it, as if space itself had become heavy. "Begin post-engagement analysis," the overseer ordered at last. The analysts complied. They always did. This time, their movements were slower. A tactical officer cleared his throat. Enemy fleet destroyed. 0 survivors were detected. No escape pods. No signal beacons. Expected, another officer muttered. However, the first continued, hesitating. "Jump calculations across 3 adjacent lanes are failing. Radiation interference exceeds projections. The overseer turned. From debris? Yes, but the distribution is unusual. The word hung there again. Unusual. The Empire disliked that word. Pull the human classification file, the overseer said. A pause. Then, which one, sir? The overseer's frill stiffened. There should be only one. There are fragments, the analyst replied. Old. Incomplete. Many are marked obsolete. The main display shifted, showing layers of archival data pulled from different eras. Notes contradicted one another. Star charts are no longer accurate. Warnings stamped with dates so old they predated current imperial borders. Explain, the overseer demanded. The analyst swallowed. Humans were first observed long ago. Pre-FTL. Planet-bound. High aggression index, but low technological growth. The recommendation at the time was monitoring only. Then why did they have a fleet? Someone snapped. That is unclear. Another analyst spoke up, voice strained. Later records mark them as self-limiting. Internal conflict. Environmental strain. Assumed eventual collapse. Assumed. The overseer stared at the words. Assumptions were luxuries. The Empire did not survive by guessing. Why were they removed from active threat assessments? He asked. A long silence followed. Finally, a junior archivist answered. Because they never expanded when expected. No colonies detected. No diplomacy. No claims. They stayed quiet. Quiet. The overseer's gaze drifted back to the debris field. To the exact spacing of wreckage. To the lanes now choked and unstable. They stayed quiet, he repeated. Until today. A navigation alarm flared. One of the Empire's patrol ships, attempting to jump around the debris field, dropped back into real space violently. Its hull twisted. Its crew screamed. The feed was cut out. The room erupted in noise. Containment failure. Jump corridor collapse. Pull all ships back now. Orders flew. Imperial vessels scrambled to safe distances, forming a defensive shell around the command sphere. What had been a clean battlefield now looked like a minefield made of ghosts. This is not possible, an officer insisted. Debris does not do this. No, the overseer agreed slowly. Not by accident. He turned to the analyst. Run a probability model. Assume the humans intended this outcome. The analyst's eyes widened. Sir, that would imply. Do it. Data streamed. Simulations ran. Outcomes branched and collapsed. One scenario kept repeating, no matter how variables were adjusted. Silence returned, heavier than before. What does it show? The overseer asked. The analyst's voice was barely audible. If intentional, then the human fleet achieved maximum disruption with minimum mass. Their losses created a cascading failure across hyperspace lanes. How long? Another officer asked. How long until the lanes stabilize? The analyst shook his head. Not days. Not weeks. Then, years. The word hit harder than any weapon. Years meant supply delays. Trade interruptions. Fleet redeployments stretched thin. Years meant border worlds isolated. Years meant problems. Problems bred weakness. This was a single fleet, an officer protested. A small one. Yes, the overseer said. Which makes it worse. They replayed the battle again, slower this time. Every human ship's path. Every detonation. The order of deaths. Patterns emerged. They didn't fire their main weapons, a tactician noted. Only point defense. They conserve power. For what? Someone asked. For timing, the analyst answered. Each ship overloaded its core at a precise moment. Too early would scatter debris. Too late would compress it. They chose exact failure. The overseer felt something unfamiliar crawl through his thoughts. Respect. No. Concern. Run background checks on the human star, he ordered. Everything. Minutes passed. The room watched projections of distant data. The human's home system appeared, dim, unremarkable, far from major routes. What do we know? The overseer asked. Very little, the analyst admitted. No formal contact. No treaties. No wars. They avoided us. They avoided everyone, another added. No alliances. No trade. Why? The overseer asked. The analyst hesitated, then answered honestly. We assumed fear. The overseer said nothing. A new alert chimed. Communication delay. Reports from outer sectors arrived late, then all at once. Convoys rerouted. Fleet stalled. Automated warnings spreading faster than explanations. The Empire was not bleeding, but it was stumbling. The overseer turned away from the displays and addressed the room. You believe this engagement proved human weakness, he said. That they threw away their lives in panic. No one answered. They did not retreat, he continued. They did not plead. They did not negotiate. He paused. They planned. A junior officer shifted uncomfortably. Sir, with respect. Even if this was intentional, it cost them everything. They gained nothing. The overseer looked at him. Nothing immediate, he corrected. The room fell quiet again. The overseer's gaze returned to the battle recording. To the first human ship that had accelerated past safety limits. To the one that had slammed itself into the cruiser. Find that broadcast, he said. The untranslated one. The analyst worked quickly. Static cleared. Fragments aligned. Still no translation. But there was rhythm. Cadence. It's not tactical, the analyst said. It doesn't match command codes. Then what is it? The overseer asked. The analyst hesitated. It might be a message meant for themselves. The overseer's frill tightened. Humans, he said slowly, tasting the word, sent a fleet they knew would die. They arranged their deaths to damage us. And they spoke to no one but themselves while doing it. He straightened. That is not desperation, he said. That is discipline. The debris field drifted silently on the screen, invisible to the stars, but fatal to anyone who tried to pass. Somewhere beyond it, unknown and uncounted, more humans waited. And for the first time since the Empire began recording history, a species misfiled as irrelevant had forced it to ask a dangerous question. What else had they planned, long before anyone was watching? The Empire responded the way it always did. With control. A perimeter was established around the debris field. Warning beacons were deployed. Traffic was rerouted through longer, safer paths. Official statements were prepared for allied systems, carefully worded to minimize concern. A minor engagement, the communique declared. Temporary navigation instability. Fully contained. The Empire told itself this lie first. For a short time, it almost worked. Then the delays began to stack. A convoy carrying medical supplies failed to arrive on schedule. Its detour added weeks. A border patrol group missed a resupply window and powered down non-essential systems to conserve fuel. An industrial world halted production when raw materials did not come. None of it was dramatic. No explosions. No screams. Just friction. The kind that built quietly, invisibly, until something snapped. Inside the command sphere, analysts worked without rest. The human debris field had been mapped from every angle. Models ran continuously, each more complex than the last. Every simulation ended the same way. The disruption spread. Hyperspace lanes don't behave like normal space, one scientist explained, voice tired. They are sensitive, structured. Even small changes can echo. And the humans knew this? The overseer asked. The scientist hesitated. They would have had to. How? No idea, the scientist admitted. Our own understanding took centuries. The overseer said nothing. He had stopped asking how. Instead, he asked when. When do we regain full mobility? He demanded. The analyst did not answer immediately. She adjusted variables, reran calculations, then exhaled slowly. Not without intervention. What kind of intervention? Large scale. Risky. How risky? She met his gaze. Destroying the debris field could collapse adjacent lanes completely. We might lose entire regions. Silence followed. The Empire had conquered stars through patience. It expanded by stabilizing space, not tearing it apart. To act rashly now would be to undo its own foundations. All because of one human fleet, an officer muttered. No, the overseer corrected. Because of one human decision. The overseer requested deeper intelligence sweeps. Not of space, but of time. Search backward, he ordered. Look for patterns. Missed signals. Anything human that did not fit. The request rippled through Imperial systems. Archives long untouched were reopened. Dusty records surfaced. Forgotten observations gained new attention. And slowly, a picture formed. Humans had not been silent. They had been selective. Long-range probes discovered faint traces near old jump points. Artificial objects, centuries old, placed just outside common sensor ranges. Not weapons. Not stations. Markers. What are they for? An analyst asked. The overseer watched the data. Navigation references, he said. Or warnings. Warnings to whom? The overseer did not answer. Another discovery followed. In a nearby system, an automated human relay activated, triggered by Imperial traffic rerouting. It transmitted a burst of data, then went dark. The Empire intercepted it. It was not encrypted. It was historical. Images of a blue-green world. Early spacecraft. Cities growing, then burning. Humans fighting themselves. Over resources. Over land. Over belief. Why show us this? An officer demanded. The analyst watched carefully. It's not a message to us, she said. It's a record. Of what? Of what they survived. The feed continued. Environmental collapse. Flooded coasts. Dying forests. Mass migrations. Then, slowly, adaptation. Reinvention. Expansion, but not outward. Inward. They rebuilt, the analyst whispered. Over and over. The overseer felt that cold feeling return. Not fear. Understanding. They learned to plan for loss, he said. As if summoned by the thought, another report arrived. Imperial scouts attempting to chart alternate routes discovered something unsettling. The human debris field was not the only problem. Similar, smaller disruptions appeared elsewhere. Old, dormant, activated by increased Imperial traffic. They're waking up, an officer said. How many? The overseer asked. The analyst hesitated. We don't know. Possibly dozens. Possibly more. The room stirred uneasily. These were not weapons placed in haste. They were not traps set in response to the Empire. They were preparations. How long? The overseer asked quietly. How long would it take to place these? The analyst checked timestamps. Orbital decay. Radiation signatures. Centuries, she said. At least. The overseer closed his eyes briefly. Centuries. That meant the humans had begun planning before the Empire ever noticed them. Before they were misfiled. Before they were dismissed. Before anyone thought they mattered. A message arrived from a frontier governor. His tone was strained. Supply shortages are escalating. Local unrest is increasing. Requesting emergency support. Another followed. Then another. The Empire was vast, but it ran on precision. When the timing slipped, everything strained. The overseer addressed the command sphere. Humans did not attack our fleets, he said. They attacked our assumptions. No one argued. A junior officer spoke, voice uncertain. Sir, why would they do this? They gain no territory. No tribute. They gain time, the overseer replied. For what? For us to bleed. The officer frowned. Bleed how? The overseer gestured to the displays. Logistics. Morale. Stability. The things empires depend on. He paused. And the things humans learn to lose without dying. Another human relay activated, this one closer. Its data burst was shorter. More recent. It showed a human shipyard, small, hidden in an asteroid field. Workers moving calmly. No panic. No rush. Text scrolled across the screen. This time, the translation worked. Phase 1 complete. The room erupted. Phase 1, someone shouted. Of what? The overseer felt something settle into place, heavy and undeniable. This fleet, he said, was never meant to win. He turned to the tactical display of the destroyed human ships. It was meant to be noticed. Silence fell again, sharper now. If this is Phase 1, an officer said slowly, what is Phase 2? The overseer did not answer immediately. Instead, he replayed the moment of the first explosion. The human ship accelerating past safety limits. No hesitation. No deviation. A deliberate death. Phase 2, he said at last, is whatever comes after we respond. As if on cue, a new alert flashed. Priority read. Multiple Imperial worlds reported simultaneous system-wide communication disruptions. Not shutdowns. Delays. Messages arrived late. Orders misaligned. Fleets moved on outdated information. Chaos did not arrive as fire. It arrived with confusion. The overseer straightened, his voice carrying across the chamber. Humans fight wars the way they live their history, he said. They endure damage. They adapt. They accept loss as part of the process. He looked at the stars beyond the screen, suddenly vast and uncertain. They did not lose a fleet, he finished. They invested it. And somewhere, far beyond Imperial sight, the next phase was already moving. The Empire began to feel the absence before it understood the cause. Entire schedules unraveled. Not catastrophically, nothing so obvious, but in small, relentless ways. A fleet arrived 2 hours late to a system that could not afford even one. A governor waited days for approval that once took minutes. Orders contradicted one another, not because they were wrong, but because they were no longer synchronized. The Empire had been built on timing. Humans had broken it. In the command sphere, the overseer stood motionless as reports scrolled past. Each one alone was manageable. Together, they formed a pattern no one wanted to name. Civilian unrest rising on 5 worlds, an officer reported. Industrial output down 12% across the corridor. Fuel rationing requested by 3 frontier fleets. The overseer raised a claw. Silence returned. Losses, he asked. The analyst hesitated. Minimal. So far. So far, the overseer repeated. He turned to the largest display, where the human debris field still floated like a scar across space. The Empire had stopped trying to remove it. Every attempt risked making things worse. Instead, they had learned to go around it, slowly. Painfully, a senior logistician stepped forward, mandibles tight. Sir, we are compensating. But the adjustments compound. Every reroute increases strain elsewhere. How long until equilibrium? The overseer asked. The answer came too quickly. We may not reach it. The overseer did not react. He had expected that. What of the humans? He asked. A pause. They are quiet, the analyst said. No fleet movements detected. No broadcasts. No demands. No demands, the overseer echoed. That, more than anything, unsettled him. The Empire knew how to handle enemies who wanted something. Territory, resources, recognition. Those desires could be negotiated, denied, or crushed. Humans wanted nothing. Or so it seemed. The silence broke when another relay activated. This one different from the others. It was not hidden. It made no effort to avoid detection. It activated openly in Imperial-controlled space and transmitted a single packet before shutting down. The overseer gestured. Display it. The image that appeared was not a battle, not a warning, not a threat. It was a funeral. Rows of humans stood in silence under an open sky. Flags, simple, worn, were folded with care. Names were spoken aloud, one by one. No titles, no ranks, just names. The room grew still. These are the crews, an analyst whispered. From the fleet. The footage continued. Children listening, elders watching. Faces hard, eyes wet, but posture unbroken. No screams, no rage, just resolve. A human speaker stepped forward. Her voice carried clearly through the recording. We knew, she said. They knew, and they went anyway. She paused, steadying herself. This is not the end of them, she continued. This is what they left behind. The transmission ended. No signature, no explanation. The overseer stared at the darkened screen. They are showing us they're dead, an officer said, confused. Why? The overseer answered quietly. Because they want us to understand the cost. Is that a threat? No, the overseer said. It is context. He turned away, mind racing. The Empire lost soldiers every cycle. Millions over centuries. Death was a statistic. A necessary expense. Humans mourned each loss, and still chose to pay it. That contradiction gnawed at him. Another report arrived, this one from a remote monitoring station. Sir, we've detected human movement. The room tensed. Where? The overseer demanded. Not fleets. Individuals. Small ships. Civilian class. Toward where? The analyst adjusted the display. Dots appeared, dozens of them, moving towards systems affected by the disruptions. They're going into unstable space? An officer asked. That's suicide. No, the overseer said slowly. It's an adaptation. The dots spread out, slipping through gaps Imperial ships avoided. They moved slower, took risks, accepted damage. They're establishing routes, the analyst realized. Crude ones. Inefficient, but functional. Why? Another officer asked. The overseer watched the map change. Because someone still has to move, he said. The implications settled uncomfortably. While the Empire struggled to maintain perfect order, humans were willing to accept imperfect survival. And it worked. Reports followed quickly. Independent traders, alien, not human, began using these new routes. Slower, riskier paths that bypassed Imperial bottlenecks. Control slipped. Not violently. Gradually. A senior officer slammed a claw against the console. We should strike them now, before this spreads. With what justification? The overseer asked. They attacked us. They destroyed a fleet that was already attacking them, the overseer corrected. in unclaimed space. The officer hesitated. And they have not struck since. The overseer continued. No words burned. No ships seized. Only consequences. He leaned forward. If we escalate without cause, he said, we become the proof they need. The room fell silent again. Another analyst spoke, voice low. Sir, we've translated more human data. Personal logs from the fleet. Play them, the overseer said. The logs were brief. Fragmented. Recorded in the final hours. A human engineer laughed as she sealed a panel. A pilot apologizing to his sister for missing a birthday. A captain reminding her crew to drink water, even now. No speeches. No hatred. Just normal people doing something extraordinary. One log ended with a simple line. If this works, remember us. If it doesn't, forget us. Either way, keep going. The overseer felt something tighten in his chest. They don't measure success the way we do, he said. No, the analyst agreed. They measure continuity. The empire had been built to endure forever by avoiding loss. Humans endured by absorbing it. That difference now mattered. A new message arrived. This one internal, classified. Sir, the analyst said carefully, long-term projections are worsening. How so? The disruptions are forcing decentralization. Local systems are making independent decisions. It improves short-term survival, but weakens central authority. The overseer closed his eyes briefly. Empires did not fall to enemies. They fell when control became optional. All this, an officer said bitterly, from a fleet we wiped out. The overseer opened his eyes. No, he said, from a fleet that finished its mission. He straightened, voice firm. Humans are not attacking our borders, he continued. They are attacking the idea that borders matter more than people. He looked around the command sphere, meeting each gaze. They have shown us they're dead, he said. They have shown us their patience. And they have shown us that they are willing to lose what we cannot afford to. Outside the display, stars burned silently, indifferent. The overseer felt, with sudden clarity, that the battle everyone feared had already passed. What remained was something worse. Time. And humans, he now understood, were very good at waiting. The Empire finally chose to look for the war. Not the one on maps. Not the one fought with fleets and banners. The other one. The quiet one. The overseer authorized the deepest scan the Empire had ever conducted, not outward, but backward. Not for weapons, but for preparation. Assume intent, he ordered. Assume intelligence. Assume patience. Those assumptions alone rewrote everything. Patterns that once looked like noise became deliberate. Old sensor ghosts, ignored for centuries, were reclassified. Minor anomalies were pulled from archives and stacked beside one another until they formed lines. And lines became plans. The first confirmation came from a dead system. It had no words worth naming. No resources. No trade value. Imperial charts marked it as empty and unimportant. It had not been visited in over 300 cycles. A scout ship entered cautiously. What it found should not have been there. Asteroids had been subtly altered. Not mined. Not reshaped. Just nudged. Their orbits corrected with precision too gentle to trigger alarms. Inside several, hollowed chambers contained equipment long dormant. Human equipment. Not military. Not industrial. Storage. Caches of spare parts. Fuel. Raw materials. Medical supplies sealed in layers of redundancy. They've been stockpiling, an officer said quietly. How long? The overseer asked. The analyst checked decay markers. Radiation exposure. Molecular breakdown. Centuries, she replied. Some of this predates our expansion into this sector. The room fell silent. They prepared before we arrived, someone whispered. No, the overseer said. They prepared without knowing if we ever would. That was worse. As more systems were inspected, the picture grew clearer. Humans had not expanded like conquerors. They had not planted flags or claimed stars. They had seeded resilience. Every cache was modest. No single one mattered much. But together, spread across forgotten space, they formed a hidden web. A second discovery followed. Imperial intelligence units uncovered evidence of human observation posts. Microscopic, power-efficient, nearly invisible unless you knew what to look for. They were not watching the borders. They were watching behavior. Fleet movements. Trade rhythms. Political cycles. They weren't spying for the attack, an analyst said. They were studying us. For what? An officer demanded. The overseer answered without hesitation. For stress points. The Empire's strength had always been scale. Massive fleets, vast infrastructure, centralized command. Humans had noticed what came with that scale. Delay, rigidity, dependence. A new report arrived from the inner sectors. A logistics AI, ancient and trusted, had begun flagging inefficiencies. No errors. Choices. Local governors were prioritizing survival over directives. Fleets were modifying routes without authorization. Not rebellion, adaptation. They're learning from the humans, an officer said. They're learning from reality, the overseer replied. Reality no longer matched imperial doctrine. Another human relay activated. This one did not show funerals or history. It showed nothing at all. Just a starfield, slowly rotating. At the edge of the frame, a line of text appeared. You don't need to fight us. The message lingered for several seconds. Then more text followed. You just need to stop pretending nothing changes. The relay went dark. The overseer felt the weight of it settle over him. This was not propaganda. It was not intimidation. It was instruction. They're not trying to destroy us, a senior advisor said slowly. They're trying to outgrow us. Yes, the overseer agreed. And forcing the galaxy to choose whether it will outgrow us too. The Empire attempted its first direct counter. A task force was assembled, not to attack human space, but to dismantle the network. Cache by cache, relay by relay. Quietly. The first few targets were easy. Old. Unprotected. Then the task force lost contact. Not destroyed. Delayed. Reports arrived late, fragmented. Strange routing errors. Navigation mismatches. Supply shortages. They were experiencing the same friction as the rest of the Empire, but deeper. They're operating beyond stable lanes, an officer noted. In regions only the humans seemed comfortable using. The overseer nodded grimly. Humans did not require perfect conditions. They required sufficient ones. A surviving task force commander finally transmitted a report. His voice was strained. We found the cache, he said. But it was already empty. How? The overseer demanded. We detected no departures. They didn't leave, the commander replied. They used it. For what? For others. The feed showed alien refugees, species long ignored by the Empire, being supplied, guided, quietly relocated through human-established routes. They're building something, the commander said. Not an alliance. A habit. The Empire had always demanded loyalty. Humans were teaching survival. The difference mattered. Back in the command sphere, the overseer convened the council. This is no longer a conflict of fleets, he said. It is a conflict of systems. Then we must reassert authority, an elder counselor argued. Force compliance. With what? The overseer asked. Speed? Certainty? Those are gone. Silence answered him. The Empire could still destroy worlds. It could still annihilate fleets. But doing so would only accelerate what the humans had started. Decentralization. Independence. Choice. Another intelligence report arrived, quieter than the rest. Sir, we believe the human fleet we destroyed was never intended to survive past first contact. The overseer nodded. I know. It was built differently, the analyst continued. Reactor design. Crew composition. Age profiles. The overseer's gaze sharpened. Explain. The crews were older. Many past prime service age. Veterans. Engineers. Specialists. People with nothing left to prove, the overseer murmured. And the ships, the analyst added. They were constructed to fail predictably. The room absorbed that. They designed their deaths, an officer said, horrified. No, the overseer corrected. They designed their impact. The Empire had thought it erased a fleet. In truth, it had triggered a mechanism. A human mechanism. Another message arrived, this one not from a relay, but from a human vessel. Small. Unarmed. Broadcasting openly. It did not flee. The overseer ordered the signal through. A human appeared on the screen. Not a soldier. Not a leader. Just a person in worn clothing. We're not here to negotiate, the human said calmly. And we're not here to threaten you. Then why are you here? The overseer asked. The human looked almost tired. Because you keep looking for the war, she said. And you're missing it. She leaned closer to the camera. You already lost the kind you know how to fight. The feed cut. The overseer remained still long after it ended. He finally understood. The humans had never intended to defeat the Empire in battle. They intended to make it irrelevant. And as reports continued to flood in, of systems adapting, of routes changing, of authority thinning, the overseer realized the most dangerous truth of all. The war had begun long before the first shot was fired, and the Empire had entered it centuries late. The Empire finally did what it had avoided since the beginning. It went to human space, not with diplomacy, not with probes or observers, with fleets. The decision fractured the council. Some warned it would prove the humans right. Others argued that allowing a quiet erosion of authority was more dangerous than any battle. In the end, fear won. Imperial armadas moved with overwhelming force, thousands of ships entering the outer reaches of human-controlled systems. Their commanders expected resistance, ambushes, traps. They found none. The first system was empty. Planets orbited peacefully around their star, untouched. Cities were dark. Stations powered down. No defensive fire. No surrender signals. Scorched space. An officer muttered. They fled. The overseer, watching from the command sphere, shook his head slowly. No, he said. They prepared. Scans revealed the truth. Infrastructure had not been destroyed. It had been simplified. Complex networks dismantled into smaller, independent nodes. Power grids isolated. Manufacturing is broken into modular units. Everything essential remained. Everything vulnerable was gone. They abandoned efficiency, an analyst said, for resilience. The Imperial fleet advanced deeper. System after system repeated the pattern. No glorious cities to conquer. No population centers to dominate. Just quiet worlds that could function even if cut off for decades. Humans did not defend territory. They defended continuity. On the third system, the Empire finally encountered resistance. A single human ship drifted near a relay point. Small, lightly armed. No fleet support. Imperial weapons locked instantly. The ship did not flee. It transmitted a message. We know you're stronger, the human voice said. That's why we didn't try to stop you. The channel remained open. We're just here to slow you down. Imperial fire erased the ship in seconds. But when the fleet attempted to jump forward, calculations failed. Not catastrophically, just enough to force delay. Rerouting took hours, then days. And during those days, something else happened. Human ships appeared, not warships, but transports. They moved civilians through secondary routes. Evacuated populations the Empire had not even detected yet. They predicted our path, an officer said, stunned. They planned around it, the overseer replied. Every Imperial advance triggered human withdrawal. Every withdrawal left behind obstacles, not weapons, but inconvenience. Fuel shortages, communication gaps, broken assumptions. Imperial commanders grew frustrated. Accustomed to decisive victories, they now fought nothing. Engagement opportunities are minimal, one commander reported angrily. The enemy refuses to stand. The overseer closed his eyes briefly. Humans were not refusing to fight. They were refusing to lose the wrong way. As the campaign dragged on, strain within the Empire grew visible. Fleets operating far from stable supply lines began cannibalizing non-essential systems. Crews worked longer rotations. Maintenance slipped. Humans, by contrast, seemed unbothered by the chaos. Reports surfaced of human communities operating without central command. Decisions made locally. Mistakes accepted and corrected quickly. They don't wait for orders, an analyst observed. They don't need to, the overseer replied. They planned for autonomy. A captured human transport finally provided the Empire with its first real prisoner. The human was not afraid, not defiant, just calm. Why don't you surrender? The interrogator demanded. You cannot win. The human looked up, eyes tired but steady. We already did, he said. The interrogator paused. Explain. We survived the part that kills most species, the human replied. You're still trying to avoid it. What part? Collapse, the human said simply. The word echoed uncomfortably. The Empire prided itself on preventing collapse at all costs. Stability was sacred. Humans treated collapse as a phase. Interrogation logs spread quickly through command channels. Officers read them in silence. One line was quoted more than any other. You can break structures. We learned to live without them. The Empire escalated again. Targeted strikes. Infrastructure denial. Pressure. Human world suffered. Power shortages. Food rationing. Casualties. And still, they did not beg. Instead, Messages appeared, quiet, internal, meant only for human networks. Hold, adapt, keep going. The overseer watched footage of a human settlement rebuilding after a strike. No speeches, no ceremonies. People worked, argued, laughed, mourned, then continued. Loss was not an ending. It was a condition. Meanwhile, imperial worlds began to feel something unfamiliar. Doubt. Supply disruptions sparked protests. Local leaders questioned orders that endangered their populations for distant objectives. Some refused to comply outright. We need time, one governor transmitted. Our people are suffering. Time. The same thing humans had been buying since the beginning. The overseer addressed the council again, his voice heavier than before. We cannot force them to fight us on our terms, he said. And if we force them to fight on theirs. He did not finish the sentence. Everyone knew. Fighting humans on their terms meant accepting loss, accepting damage, accepting change. The Empire could not do that without becoming something else. A final report arrived from the front. Sir, our fleets are intact, but morale is declining. Commanders report uncertainty. They don't know what victory looks like. The overseer stared at the stars on the display. Victory, he realized, had never been the human goal. Persistence was. And persistence was contagious. The overseer finally understood the full weight of the mistake. The Empire had assumed humans would break when pressed. Instead, pressure revealed what they were made of. Not steel, not weapons. Refusal. Refusal to quit. Refusal to collapse on someone else's schedule. Refusal to disappear quietly. As the Imperial fleet stalled in human space, strong, armed, and slowly losing relevance, the overseer recorded a private note for the archives. Humans do not resist destruction, he wrote. They plan for it. And for the first time since the Empire's founding, he feared not an enemy's strength, but their endurance. The galaxy noticed the silence before it noticed the shift. Imperial announcements grew less frequent. Not weaker, never that, but delayed. Decrees arrived out of order. Patrol schedules slipped. Once unquestioned authority now came with explanations attached. That alone was enough to draw attention. Neutral systems, long accustomed to aligning themselves carefully between imperial power and survival, began asking questions they had never dared to voice. Why were trade routes unreliable? Why were imperial fleets everywhere, yet nowhere decisive? Why did systems near human space seem calmer? At first, the Empire dismissed these questions as background noise. Curiosity was harmless. It always has been, until it wasn't. The first real fracture came from a client species on the Empire's outer rim. Small, resource-poor, loyal for generations. They announced a temporary suspension of tribute shipments. Not refusal, suspension. The message was polite, apologetic, firm. Our people cannot endure further shortages, the governor wrote. We will resume contributions when stability returns. The council was stunned. This is insubordination, an elder counselor snarled. We must respond. With what? Another asked quietly. The fleets are committed. Silence answered that. Word spread. Other systems followed, not in rebellion, but in imitation. Delays. Adjustments. Exceptions. Each one small. Each one is reasonable. Together, they were devastating. The Empire had always relied on compliance through predictability. Everyone knew what would happen if they stepped out of line. Now, no one was sure. Human influence did not arrive as fleets or declarations. It arrived as an example. In disrupted regions, human-established routes became common knowledge. Not secret, just available. Slower, less efficient, but independent of imperial scheduling. Merchants used them first, then aid convoys, then entire populations relocating quietly, beyond easy reach. The Empire did not forbid it. It could not without admitting weakness. Human communications began appearing in unexpected places. Not broadcasts, not propaganda. Stories. Accounts of how to survive isolation. How to rebuild power grids from scrap. How to decentralize food production. How to make decisions locally when central authority failed. They're not recruiting, an analyst observed. They're teaching. That's worse, the overseer replied. Teaching spread faster than orders. In a distant world, a minor species rerouted its entire economy through human-style networks. When imperial inspectors arrived, they found nothing illegal. Just different. We are still loyal, the planetary leader insisted. We have simply diversified. Diversified. The word tasted bitter. The overseer watched the galaxy change on his displays, not in explosions, but in color shifts. Regions once marked solid imperial blue became mottled, mixed, uncertain. The empire still existed, but it no longer defined the default. Meanwhile, reports from the human front grew stranger. Imperial fleets remained intact. Casualties were low, and yet, commanders requested redeployment, not out of fear, but futility. "We are holding space that does not matter," one wrote. "They will not engage us. We cannot force an outcome." The humans had done something unprecedented. They had turned strength into irrelevance. A turning point came when a long-standing imperial rival made its move. Not an invasion, an announcement. They declared their borders open to human logistics networks. No alliance, no pact, just access. Trade surged. Stability followed. Other powers noticed. "The humans are reshaping the balance," a counselor said grimly. "If this continues, the empire will not be the center anymore." The overseer nodded. "And centers," he said, "are what empires depend on." Desperate to reassert narrative control, the empire released its first public account of the conflict. It framed the human fleet's destruction as a decisive victory, emphasized imperial restraint, claimed the situation was under control. The response was muted. Too many systems had already experienced the truth. Worse, human voices responded, not with rebuttals, but with quiet confirmation. "Yes," one message read, "they destroyed our fleet. And still, we are here." Another read, "We do not need to win battles if we survive outcomes." These messages were not angry, not triumphant. They were calm. The galaxy listened. A neutral historian broadcast a widely shared analysis. "The empire has always punished resistance," she said. "Humans do not resist. They adapt. And adaptation is harder to crush than defiance." The empire attempted one final show of force. A massive fleet maneuver near a neutral hub world. A reminder of power. A warning. The humans did nothing. No counter-movement. No message. Instead, independent networks rerouted around the display entirely. Trade continued. Life went on. The fleet hung in space, terrifying and ignored. That was the moment the overseer knew. Fear was no longer enough. Within the empire, fractures widened. Younger officers questioned doctrine. Older ones clung to it harder. Decision-making slowed as consensus fractured. "Humans haven't destroyed our fleets," the overseer said to the council. "They've destroyed our certainty." A counselor slammed his claw down. "Then we must destroy theirs." "What certainty?" the overseer asked quietly. No answer came. Because the humans had none. They planned without guarantees, acted without promises of success, sacrificed without assurance of reward. The empire could not comprehend that mindset, and so it could not defeat it. A final intelligence report arrived, compiled from dozens of sources across the galaxy. Human networks were now embedded everywhere. Not dominant, not centralized, present, like roots. "They are not building an empire," the analyst concluded. "They are making empires optional." The overseer dismissed the council and remained alone in the command sphere. He replayed the earliest footage again, the human fleet advancing into certain death. At the time, he had seen weakness. Now he saw clarity. They had never expected the empire to fall quickly. They had expected it to struggle, to resist, to spend strength maintaining a shape that no longer fits the galaxy. Humans did not overthrow the empire. They taught the galaxy how to live without it. And as the stars outside continued their indifferent burn, the overseer recorded one last private thought, meant not for history, but for warning. "The most dangerous species is not the one that conquers," he wrote. "It is the one that survives you and shows others how to do the same." The empire did not fall in a single moment. There was no final battle, no burning capital, no last transmission filled with defiance. Instead, there was a meeting, small, quiet, recorded for history, though no one expected it to matter. The overseer sat alone in a dim chamber, far from the command sphere that had once been the heart of everything. Across from him hovered a projection, an alien historian from a neutral world, tasked with documenting what remained of imperial authority. "You may begin," she said gently. The overseer looked older than he should have. His frill had dulled. His posture, once rigid, had softened. "We believed we were eternal," he said. The historian did not interrupt. We believed stability was the highest good, he continued. That preventing collapse justified any action. He paused, then gave a slow, bitter motion of acknowledgement. We were wrong. Outside the chamber, the empire still existed, technically. Fleets still flew their banners. Laws were still enforced in core systems. But beyond that core, reality had shifted. Trade no longer depended on imperial routes. Security no longer required imperial patrols. Survival no longer required imperial permission. The humans had not replaced the empire. They had rendered it unnecessary. The historian adjusted her recorder. When did you realize it was over? The overseer did not answer immediately. His gaze drifted, unfocused, to memories that would never leave him. When we destroyed their fleet, he said at last. The historian hesitated. That was the beginning. No, the overseer replied. That was the end. We just didn't know it yet. He remembered the moment clearly, the human ships advancing, dying, refusing to retreat. At the time, it looked like foolish courage. Now, he understood it as something far colder. Calculation. They sent us people they could afford to lose, he said. Not because those lives were worth less, but because those people had already given everything. The historian's voice was quiet. And the empire? The overseer's frill tightened. We could not afford to lose anything, he said. That was our weakness. Outside the empire's borders that now existed mostly on old maps, human networks continued to operate. Not under a single flag, not under a single command. They were messy, imperfect, sometimes inefficient. But they worked. A former imperial world broadcast a public statement that cycle. It did not declare independence. It simply announced a change in classification. We are no longer a client state, the governor said calmly. We are self-sustaining. The empire issued no response. There was nothing left to threaten. The historian reviewed her notes. Many in the galaxy now describe humans as terrifying, she said. Not because of their weapons, but because of their thinking. The overseer gave a humorless click. They terrify us because they are not afraid of endings, he said. They plan for them. He leaned forward. Every species we conquered believed the future depended on us. Humans believed the future depended on adaptation. That difference is fatal. The historian hesitated, then asked the question that had followed her across half the galaxy. Why didn't they finish you? She asked. Why not strike the final blow? The overseer looked up sharply. Because that would have required becoming us, he said. He gestured weakly at the insignia still etched into the chamber walls. They never wanted an empire, he continued. They wanted a galaxy where no single failure could doom everyone. He laughed softly, a sound stripped of pride. And to do that, he said, they had to let us die slowly. The recording ended there. Years later, long after the empire's name had become a historical term rather than a political one, a group of alien cadets studied the conflict as part of standard education. They watched the original battle footage. The human fleet advancing. The imperial guns firing. The ships vanished, one by one. A young cadet raised a limb. If the humans knew they would lose, they asked, why send the fleet at all? The instructor did not answer immediately. Because, she said finally, the fleet was not there to fight. She paused the footage on the moment of the first human detonation. It was there to teach. To teach what? Another cadet asked. The instructor looked around the room. That victory is not the same as survival, she said. And that sometimes, the most dangerous move, is refusing to disappear. The final lesson came from a different source. A human archive, open to the galaxy decades after the conflict, contained a simple statement attributed to an unnamed strategist. If they think we are weak, let them. If they destroy us, let it matter. If we die, let it change the rules. That message spread farther than any fleet ever had. And so, when future empires studied the fall of the old one, they did not focus on battles or numbers. They focused on a single mistake. The empire had assumed humans would fight to win. Humans fought to endure. They sacrificed fleets not to conquer space, but to reshape it. They accepted loss not as failure, but as fuel. They refused to quit not because they were strong, but because quitting had never saved them before. And that is why, when the galaxy finally understood what had happened, it reached a single, unanimous conclusion. Humans are terrifying, not because they cannot be destroyed, but because even when they are, they keep going.